welcome to our webinar today on Beyond the Trends, Legal AI in the Real World. I'm your host, Caroline Hill. I'm the editor of Legal IT Insider, and I'm joined today by Jen Poon from NetDocuments, who I'll introduce in just one second. We are going to be talking about, following on from the success of our last webinar with NetDocuments, which was the AI revolution in legal tech, we're back to show you what AI is looking like in practice. So AI and automation aren't distant concepts, but essential tools. And the challenge isn't really now whether to, but how to implement AI effectively. And I love Jen's description when we were prepping for this webinar. The proof is in the pudding, and now we've had a year to, or the proof of what's the expression, Jen? The proof of the pudding is in the eating, and we've had a year to make the pudding. So Jen has nearly a decade of legal experience. She currently serves as Legal AI Solutions Director at NetDocuments, was previously litigation counsel at Aiken Gump, and also previously a corporate associate at Simpson Thacher. Hi, Jen.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
What is that expression?
The proof is in the pudding, but now we have to eat it. I don't know. I say stuff sometimes, and I'm pretty sure I got it from AI probably, and now it's out there in the ether, forever lost. But no, it's been a year now, and I feel like a year ago, everyone was still sort of either like, oh no, this is not going to be a thing, you know what I mean? And now I think everyone's like, this is definitely here to stay, and now we're starting to see some of the flaws, but also some of the real possibilities in the technology.
Yeah, and that brings perfectly to what we're going to be talking about today. So we'll be looking at what the use cases. So important, I think, to go to talk about practical implementation. So we'll be looking at the legal AI, your legal AI assistant, some of the use cases in action, as it were, and we'll be looking at where things are working well and where they're not working as well. One of the things I love about chatting with Jen is that we have these candid conversations. I think that's why we get a lot of people joining us, and you're welcome to ask questions as we go, as always. We'll be looking quite specifically at adoption, so where adoption is going well. So things like, whether how you vet technology before buying it, and Jen's experience in terms of what's working well there, and perhaps not so well. Jen will be demoing NetDocuments Legal AI Assistant, and we'll be finishing up talking about some general learning along the way in terms of creating policy, ethics training, and general provisions, which is, as you say, there's been a year of learning, and these inside conversations are so helpful in terms of leveraging or learning from your experience of working with firms. So ask questions as we go. So before we dive into use cases, we are going to have a demo, Jen, but just let's talk about what you're talking about in terms of the technology before we dive into the actual use cases and where it's working well. Just describe the technology that they're using.
Yeah, sure. So I think right now the way we're thinking about it at NetDocs is that the technology can roughly be divided into 4 categories. As a mental model, you can think of it right now. There's search or like access functions, and that's like being able to search for the right precedents. There's assistance, that's that ChatGPT experience where you're asking questions like one prompt after the other and getting results. That's sort of like your legal assistant or your legal clerk. But it's not doing full-on workflows. When you get to the point where you're automating full-on workflows, then that's an application. Think of it as like a factory assembly line. And then the last category is when you have a true agent experience. And currently, I think there's debate over this, but there's not a real agent out there. An agent just doesn't automate a workflow. It makes decisions on your behalf. It has discretion and autonomy, and really it's a delegate to accomplish a task. So for example, I use this example all the time because it's a real live example, using ChatGPT to put together a travel itinerary. So, you could use Google AI right now to search for like your recommendations, right? So which blogs are giving me the travel, which bloggers are much like myself and would give me recommendations I trust. And then you might use ChatGPT, the assistant, to be like, well, why is one better than the other? Is it missing anything? Have you considered this? Can you put it in a timeline for me? And then your automation would be where it actually like compiles it into an itinerary for you. But then the agent part is that it actually goes out and books those reservations for you, makes decisions between the different recommendations, etc. So we've got all the way up to really the assistant experience, but with travel itineraries, I yet to see like an application or an agent experience yet. But I look forward to it since me and my fiance fight all the time over who's in charge of the travel plans.
And actually,
Yeah.
I think that agentic, this is going to be more the year of that agentic, really taking hold. So tell me about, so what's working well? So I know, for example, you talk about transactional is going, I think, gangbusters. So just talk me through some of the use cases that you're seeing that firms are doing really well with, or seeing success with.
Yeah, so I think so far transactional groups have been going gangbusters.
Mm.
Anything where you're less reliant on like external sources such as like case law in order to draft something. So we've seen in the transactional context like a lot of extractions like en masse. If you're doing reviews of really long documents like partnership agreements or fund formation agreements, and you just need a quick summary, AI is really good at doing that. It can do that for litigation context as well, like summarizing a complaint. But in transactional law, you can actually go ahead and just start drafting stuff as well using those precedents. And we've seen that. We've seen like drafting of credit agreements, drafting of like vendor agreements, drafting of even like estate plans. But when it comes to litigation, because you are relying on case law that needs to be updated, those integrations need to be built between the research platforms and
Okay.
kind of companies like ours before that'll really sort of like work.
Yeah,
Same thing.
yeah.
Yeah, we're also waiting for those integrations to be built with like e-discovery vendors. So that was the other sort of divide I was going to point out. You have those
Okay.
4 different types of tech, but then you also have 3 different industries sort of emerging: e-discovery, legal research, and then the DMS. Like I think those
Mhm.
divisions, unlike I think 2 years ago I was defending that like there will still be a DMS and still like an e-discovery company and still legal research. I think I was right because those divisions are still in place and
Yeah.
integrations need to be built. Yeah.
They really do. I think I'm hoping to see some progress. Perhaps I'm an eternal optimist. In terms of just taking you back a little bit to the working well, I might take you back a bit as well to the what's not working well. But so in terms of specific use cases, so I know you've mentioned things like deposition summaries and companion side letters. And can you do a bit of a deeper dive perhaps to sort of
Sure.
how this is, how this is being used by firms?
Yeah, so the top use case, like I said, is extraction. It's doing
Yeah.
those templated summaries of long documents, lease agreements, partnership agreements, etc. And in NetDocs, we did doc automation first. So that means that when you press the magic button with AI, it spits out a Word document that's
Mhm.
formatted to your specifications, has your firm letterhead on it. And that kind of sets us apart from other vendors who don't have that doc automation piece integrated with their AI technology. They might have like a Word plugin or something instead. So we see that. We see the automating of like form motions and agreements, credit agreements, like a lot of different forms in bankruptcy, estate plans, in the immigration context, like support letters, in litigation, deposition summaries, timeline construction, using it to brainstorm deposition outlines. And then, going back to the corporate context, like one customer is using it to automate review of like 700 small contracts that they were renewing. So to perform sort of like diligence use cases to like see what people have agreed on before, using it to summarize side letters that different investors have agreed to, that sort of accompany the limited partnership agreement, and also if there's like a most favored nation clause, sort of drawing out what everyone's agreed to on the back end into like a data table or database,
Mhm.
so that you can quickly know what your obligations are with respect to those investors. So
Yeah.
I like to keep, there's been so many patent applications. We've also sort of like automated anything where a lot of times it's a lawyer who's sort of like manually entering but not really changing the format or a lot of the sort of body of those documents. So like
Yeah.
also like environmental assessment letters and like so many practice groups, but we're all hitting off those high value use cases
Yeah.
that lend themselves to automation.
So it's very much still in the corporate department, probably. It sounds like a lot of it will be very much centered in corporate.
Yeah, a lot of it's in corporate, some of it is in litigation, but like I said, because
Yeah.
that integration with Lexis and Westlaw is still not fully built out yet, you still can't really go in there and be like, draft this for me unless you feed it the case law yourself.
Yeah, no, it's a problem. Okay, so um, so is in terms of we're going to come on to sort of adoption shortly, but sorry, I'm having trouble with my mouse. I really apologize. My mouse has given up the ghost. So in terms of sort of the performance of the assistant itself, I know we're going to come on to a demo, but people are learning as well, aren't they? Like, so you need that you already mentioned those repetitive tasks. So there's certain types of work, I guess we all have to adjust to the type of work where it's appropriate for these tools. So that kind of routine, repetitive, albeit high value work, there's no point in trying to use these tools where it's a fairly discrete task. Is that something that people are starting to be comfortable with, or is that something that is still a bit of a learning curve?
I think usually when you introduce these tools like our assistant to these law firms and people have been waiting for something like this, so they're too scared to use ChatGPT, especially because ChatGPT, it's public. And so everything you perform on there, it's subject to OpenAI training its models on it. It could be subject to a data leak. There will be like algorithmic and human oversight over it. So you might have in the headlines, like they've been waiting for stuff like this. So typically what we found is when we give them this tool that's like safe and secure on their DMS where they work every day, it's joy. They're like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. Where was this in my life? Um, and with the assistant, you don't have to. The assistant is just like ChatGPT. So, like I said, the difference between that and an application is that you can do it ad hoc on the fly, as I'll be
Yeah.
showing. So you can interrogate your documents really quickly, and that immediately already has a lot of impact in like the daily lives of attorneys, or
Mm-hmm.
lawyers, rather than having to like open a document, search for the answers, and then like kind of eyeball the whole document to make sure you didn't miss anything. You just
Mm-hmm.
have a sanity check now with the AI, or like even a first cut at something
Mm-hmm.
that you can go in and validate afterwards. So
But and is it right that it has to look like, so in terms of that familiarity? So I know that we're learning about what lawyers need in terms of customization and familiarity. And is it right that lawyers, it needs to be quite customized in terms of the output? It needs to be, we're still struggling, and probably rightly so, with the black box concept. And actually the lawyers need to be familiar with the wording. It needs to look and feel like something that they would produce. And if it doesn't, then they're going to go back to the sort of more manual way of
yeah.
doing
So
things.
So again, I'd like to distinguish between the assistant, which is just like the answers. I think what we're talking about here is the applications, like the
Yeah,
workflow automations.
yeah.
Those are the ones where, yes, it needs to look hew as closely to the lawyer's work product and like precedents as possible. We often
Yeah,
work
that
with
makes
the
sense.
lawyers to develop those.
Yeah.
And yeah, for those ones, we are also seeing that um, people are figuring out that not everything needs to be made into an application. It's really only those high volume ones that's like fairly manual and intense and takes a lot of time, but isn't very creative and doesn't require that level of creativity or bespokeness. That's like number one use case for applications. So like patent
Okay.
applications, for example, where you're doing one
Okay.
patent application and then filing it in multiple jurisdictions,
Yeah.
having that the workflow as automation would come in would be like taking that first application and duping it out for the different jurisdictions.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Um, I feel so. We are going to come on, for those of you who've joined us. We are going to come on to a demo of the Legal AI Assistant. Thanks for joining us. For people who've come in late and I haven't said hello, do ask questions as we go. Jen's great at asking questions throughout the webinar. We've done this before, haven't we, Jen?
Yeah, we have.
uh,
And I'm actually going to show the assistant first and then show an application just to show the difference between the
yeah.
two. I'm going to use both of them to do sort of like the same goal, but it'll
Okay.
quickly come across why I keep on talking about the difference between the two. Should
Yeah.
I jump
Okay.
into it?
Do you know what? I was going to ask you about
Yeah.
adoption, but I feel like maybe let's do the demo first, and then we can talk about, so because I feel like we need to see it, like, so if we do
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
demo, and then we'll talk about where you're seeing good adoption, and why, and then we can talk about some of the more general points that we talked about at the beginning. So yeah, just over to you for the demo.
I'll do something risky and share my screen just so I don't have to keep on hopping in between windows. So if you guys see something that is not safe for work, just privately chat. No, just kidding. There should be nothing on here. Okay. So I'm on the NetDocs DMS document management system platform right now. And as you see, I just have a folder of like different agreements that I'm working on. Let me just move this. Caroline, can you see that?
I can see that. Yeah. I'm just
Yeah.
nudge
So either I can just select this or I can drag and drop. I'm a big fan of drag and drop because I am a lawyer. So I'll go ahead and open up my assistant. As you see, currently I have 0 files indexed. I'm going to go ahead and just drag and drop this one here. So currently I can sort of put up to 100 files in this and start asking questions. What it's doing, you'll see it's loading here, is it's semantically indexing the file. So it's basically processing it. And after that, we'll be able to do all the fun stuff. See, it's already done. This agreement is a real one that we pulled off of the American Public Securities filing website, Edgar. So it's a real document. I'm not making it up. These ones are also real. Blackstone, Flanagan, Shayho. So, Sam and a lawyer and I get this agreement and they're like, review it. I might just start asking, what are the restrictions on transfer of partnership units? So this is the assistant, right? So this is what I mean. This is a chat interface where I'm doing sort of ad hoc questions or really ad hoc prompting because this is a prompt right here. So I'm going to start answering me. Now, some of you at this point, you've probably seen this at a lot of AI vendors. So you're like, wow, or you're like, oh, everybody can do this. But, as someone who was born during the era of dial-up, I think we've come a really long way.
Yeah.
So if a partner just asks me, hey, can you check quickly if the LPA has a restriction on transfer? And then I'll be like, yeah, you need the consent of the general partner. The general partner will consent under these conditions. They cannot transfer their interest except to their affiliates and only after the termination of the investment period. Any transfer made in violation of these restrictions is void. So it's giving me a pretty fulsome answer.
Yeah.
And then it's giving me the source.
Quickly as well.
Yeah. And then I could just be like, draft this in an email, send it off, or I could keep asking questions, right? So here it's telling me the source. In a future upgrade, when you hover your mouse over this little footnote here, it'll give you the exact citation and you'll be able to view it in the document in a preview setting as to like where it's getting these answers from.
Are you able to, Jen, put the demo screen on maximum? Because people are saying that they can't maximize the demo screen, that I think you're as large as the demo screen.
I think this is as large as it goes. Can you see it, Caroline?
I can see it, yeah. I mean, I think that people maybe they're asking for it to be larger, but if you I can see it on my screen, but
yeah, sorry, I think this is as big as it gets.
Oh, there we go. That's better.
There we go. Does that work?
Perfect.
Is that better?
Yeah, I think as long as it adjusts to the size. Just shout in the chat if that's better, or is that's better. Okay,
I've blown it up.
Much better. Perfect. Yeah.
So as you see, I've even made a typo. Doesn't matter. Is there a right of first refusal? And it says the document does not explicitly mention a right of first refusal, but it does outline conditions and restrictions on the transfer of partnership units. So pretty good answer.
This is taking you. You can go to where obviously the one or whichever the number is. So you can go to where that is found in the document immediately.
That's what I would say. Is that here I can just open it in preview and then go. Currently, it just references the document. So I have multiple documents here. It'll tell me which document the answer is from. Yeah. Right now, we don't have the citations available, but in an upgrade, when we hover over this, it will give us the exact citation and take us to the place in the document where it gets that info from. So coming soon. We're doing a lot of We're doing a lot of like cool things with this. I'm going to unblow it up just so that I can see it. We're doing a lot of cool things with this. Like with the assistant, we're going to add like a auto markup tool where if you add
Yeah.
instructions like, okay, now change the governing jurisdiction of this LPA to Delaware, and then hit enter, it'll automatically mark up that document for you, and you'll be able to approve or reject the change, much like you would in track changes.
Yeah.
We're also adding like an auto extract function where you can say, create a table and then like just free form extract information from the document in a tabular format. So we think that that's going to like really be a game changer when you're reviewing multiple documents. Like for these 3 agreements, for this column, I want jurisdiction of formation, I want limitations on transfer, I want the date that it was executed, all that stuff. So as you can see, though, this is really just ad hoc interrogation. Okay, summarize these restrictions in an email to the partner. You can do a lot of cool stuff on here. You can get creative. You can ask it to add a joke, as I sometimes do for my own entertainment. It's really good at dad jokes. Here,
I did that with my Alexa.
consent requirement, conditions for transfer. There you go. And it's given me, now I can just wait for it to be done. I can now, here you go, copy and paste that into an email and off you go, right? But I can refine it. We'll see what it comes up with. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not.
Is a joke what a joke email? Oh, you're adding a joke in the email.
Add a joke to the end of the email.
For any associates watching, do not do this. Do not try this at home.
I don't know. It depends on the partner. I'm just kidding. Here. Why don't lawyers play hide and seek? Because good luck hiding when they always find the loophole. Hey, go.
That joke.
Go 4-0. Yeah. That's
Someone just asked, is the system only for US law?
No,
Just
it
like,
is not. Yeah. So on the back end, it's utilizing, we're model agnostic. So whenever the latest and greatest model comes up, we'll just swap it out. Right now it's 4.0. And we're using that LLM, but we ask it only to refer to the documents that you selected to reduce the probability or incidence of hallucination. So if we were playing around with like English jurisdiction, UK jurisdiction documents, then it would just sort of perform the functions on those documents. It's not jurisdiction specific.
Yeah, because it's just and does it flag in terms of accuracy? I know you said that there's less concern or there's been less incident of hallucination. Is that now? Would you suggest that? I don't think it's ever not a concern, but when people are reading the output, where would you gauge in terms of the risks or the concerns now?
Yeah, so if you ask just ChatGPT normal questions like I asked it, tell me about the Twitter merger, like a few months, maybe this was last year. It hallucinated an answer immediately. It was like, that's when Tesla bought Twitter. I was like, that is not what happened. But our settings are extremely limited. We're, again, only asking it to focus on the documents that we've selected and ask the AI assistant to look at. We have the temperature setting on the back end to 0. So the temperature setting, for some of you might already know this, it's how creative the AI gets between responding to you. So if you have it set to 0, you're going to get more or less the same response over and over again, no matter if you ask the same question. If you set it up, if you put the temperature setting up, it's going to get more creative. So the answers are going to be less consistent. So we have that all the way to 0. But we have a lot of those settings on the back end, basically, to really make this fit for purpose for the legal industry, knowing the concerns and priorities of lawyers.
Okay. Sorry, I keep interrupting, but I know you're good at this, Jen.
No worries. So as you see, just give me 1 second. My dog has decided to go attack a squeaky toy.
It's all going on. It's all going on today.
Yeah. So as you see here, this is sort of like ad hoc. You have to chain prompts together is what we call them in order to get that answer. But imagine that you just want to press a button and it extracts like 20 points of data from this from this document, and you wanted to spit it out in like a Word template that you've prepared that has your firm letterhead on it, so that you don't have to keep on asking these questions over and over again, because maybe you need to summarize not just one LPA, but like 7 to like 100 of them. So you don't want to have to do this, right? So this is a template that I've created. This is a fictional firm. I am Poon. Poe is my other colleague, Kyle Poe. Meacham is our app builder here at NetDocs. So I have a placeholder for the date of the review, the name of the limited partnership that we're reviewing. So here's some general provisions: title, date, partnership name, state of formation. And for those who are lawyers in the audience, you know that even sometimes finding this like putting it in is like time consuming. There might be typos or whatever. You have to like double check everything twice because like you're doing this at like 4 a.m. So you're like, is that the general partner or is that the limited partner? And then we also have a column for the citation here, because you always want to go and validate the AI. Again, it's the incidence of hallucination is really getting lower nowadays, but you never know. So always double check. And then you have some more complicated terms that you might be curious about. So, for example, do limited partners have a requirement to fund capital calls in excess of initial capital contributions in the event of repayment of debt? What are the powers of the general partner? The D&O indemnification terms. How do you remove the general partner? And here you go. You have the right of first refusal restrictions on transfer here. So on the back end of the application that we have built for this template, we will have entered and refined the prompt for each of these calls, basically. And these would be individual prompts, calls made to OpenAI to sort of fill out the summary. And we've also made it so that the summary is only like 4 to 5 sentences long, not like, 300, just like a real associate would summarize it. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to hop into my apps. So again, assistant, and now this is an app. By the way, I initially built this just as a proof of concept, as a demo for customers, but people liked it so much that it's now available on our studio apps. So NetDocs has a bunch of pre-built out-of-the-box applications. This is a public-facing website that if you're a customer, here you go, it's right in here. You can just sort of hop into and then download if you're an existing customer. So this one is available today. And if you don't like my proprietary mix of documents that I have, what did I put here? That I have created, then, or provisions that I've created, then you could go in the back end and tweak them and make them your own. So I'm going to go ahead and select that agreement that I just was running the assistant questions on. And then I just hit continue, and then you get this loading page. Again, for those of you who are around during dial-up, this is annoying, but one day, hopefully, as the models get better, it'll be like non-existent and it'll just be instant. Also, on the assistant here, as you see, you kind of currently have to select documents and drop them in, and then it processes them. In the latter half of 2025, we will have completed our search, our access tool, which is semantic search. That's where you could, currently, when you look for a document, you need to type in keywords and Booleans. Here, when we're done with semantic search, every single file that you drop into our DMS will be automatically indexed and processed. So then you can just ask questions of your DMS in natural language, like find me the 5 contracts from this partner in the last 5 years in the private equity industry that contains a material adverse effect clause, and it will give you those search results in order of relevancy. You can ask it a question like, give me a summary of those material adverse effect clauses in that industry, and I'll give you a brief answer and then also links to the relevant documents, much like when you ask a question on Google search right now. So I'm going to, yeah, very cool. So it's already done processing. And if I showed you this agreement, it's about 70 pages long. It's PDF. So we can process PDFs, you can process Word documents. So I'm just going to show you, no demo magic. This is real. So just perform that for us. And it's telling me the citation, so I can quickly hop in and like check whether all the answers are correct. So do they have to fund capital calls? Yes. It's telling you look at section 3.3b. This provision is found in section 3.4. Here's the powers of the general partner, terms of indemnification, removal terms, pretty standard,
It's
gross negligence. And then here, oh, sorry, sometimes depending on the instance I'm using, this blanks out, but usually it fills out the whole thing.
mm,
Um, restrictions of on transferring units. It's the same answer that the assistant gave me, consent of the general partner, blah, 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 but no right of first refusal, which was consistent with the answer we got with the assistant. And here's the termination or dissolution events and clawback.
I wasn't a
So
corporate lawyer, but you have to produce this for the client, right? Off in many cases, and it takes ages. Like I've spoken to other people about this, and it takes a really long time, and it's part of the natural workflow. So to be able to do it that quickly, I have to say, is impressive.
yeah, and this is just 20, I think, or like
Mm,
19. We've done it like 50 to 80
mm,
provisions, like really specific ones where each prompt on the back end for one of these is also quite long. And they're separate calls to OpenAI just because it's so specific as to that piece of information that they're looking for that the
yeah,
prompting becomes like quite unwieldy and you wouldn't want to enter it every single time on your own. But because it's all done on that back end, it's all the same to you. You just press the button and it'll give you the result. So we think
yeah,
that that's quite powerful. And we've literally heard that this would save like 9 to 10 hours of review
yeah,
and like tens of thousands of dollars in terms of billable hours. And also, this isn't like high value work per se, right? It's very commoditized. And so it just sometimes it's not even profitable, right? You're just doing it as like a client service. But if you can get rid of associates spending time doing this, they can focus on like other higher value work, actually drafting a net new limited partnership agreement or whatever, or commenting on one. So
yeah,
we've seen this with, as I said, leases, other use cases, but it also kind of shows our doc automation plus Gen AI capabilities. And it's never a final work product, right? Like the attorneys should still go in and check that all these references are correct. As you see here, AI was naughty and like didn't finish these two things. But our idea is that we get you like 70 to 80% of the way there. And then, that's already way above what you're starting
yeah.
from in the
100%.
in
And
the analog
this is not
ages.
chargeable usually. There's a question, perhaps there's a couple of questions actually. So and if you want to, sorry, but don't mean to interrupt. Is that okay to ask now, Jen? Do you mind?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I'm done the demo part.
Okay, perfect. There's a question about will you allow the user to edit the backend settings? I mean, you just touched on some ways that you can edit the backend if you wanted to change the types of documents, etc. But perhaps you could answer that question more in the round as well. I'm not quite sure. If you want to clarify any particular
Yeah.
details of what you're asking, then please do in the chat. But as in broad terms, will you allow the user to edit the backend settings?
Yeah, so it's just like if you can go on, I think on OpenAI you can toggle it as well. But for some settings, you definitely can. So for that application you saw, we're using an app builder called Pattern Builder Max. And on the back end, it's just like blocks. It's a low code slash no code solution. So like a dum dum like me with no technical or programming experience can actually go in and like build an app myself. But every time you send a call to OpenAI, in that block, there's toggles for like temperature. For example, you can like move the temperature up, you can move it down. We always recommend leaving it at 0. And then you can also like, limit the amount of tokens that you're using per call. You can kind of switch the model out for us. Like if you like for mini, for example, better and you want this app to work faster, you can choose that as the default model. So yes, there are certain settings that you can toggle on the back end. So I
That
see the
answers
other,
that
yeah.
answers the other question about can you choose the LLM if you don't want to use OpenAI?
So currently we only kind of go with OpenAI. We think it's, the leader in the field. But we're model agnostic, so we're not wedded to any particular AI. So, that would be a question for our product team if they plan to kind of build it. But theoretically, yeah, we right now you can toggle between the different models. So 4.1 is out. We're working on integrating that on the back end. Once that is, you can just switch to it.
Okay, fine.
Um, the system is not only for US law. I think that question was answered earlier. It's just,
Security.
yeah,
That
it's
someone's
like
asking about what about security, ICO, GDPR? It's a
yeah.
very
The
broad.
LL Since we're using like the LLMs, they're not jurisdiction specific. Security and ICO and GDPR. So we have a zero data retention policy. So this is the why we think that there's a big value proposition in going with our assistant, because you might have your associates going and just dropping documents onto ChatGPT. That's public. OpenAI
Mm,
will be able to train its model. There's monitoring of it. So, feasibly, if it triggers like CSAM monitoring flags, then a human will be able to look into that data. When you use our assistant, the all the stuff you send to OpenAI is immediately scrubbed. It's called a zero data retention policy.
yeah.
So there's no human or algorithmic oversight. OpenAI doesn't train its models on it. And we've worked really hard to secure those exemptions from OpenAI and Microsoft in order for us to kind of do our work. If you get an enterprise level subscription, I think to OpenAI, they still have like a 30-day retention policy. So that data is
Yeah.
still subject to monitoring. So
I think that's
that's
been one
one
of the
thing to pay
biggest
attention to when
blocks.
choosing a vendor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's been one of the biggest concerns and blocks for law firms, in terms of really sort of getting over the fine print, and making sure that it's not being used to train the model. I think there's still real concerns over that confidentiality aspect. We are moving on. Like I see, the industry is progressing at the rate of knots, but there are still some big blockers, and I do think that this is one big concern, not surprisingly.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think
Um,
that's right.
I wanted
Do
I
you?
wanted to turn to this question too, just to be specific about the system only for US law. This is like asking if like ChatGPT is specific to US law. No, right? It's whatever is collectively on the internet. So, like I said, we haven't built integrations with like the legal research platforms right now, but on the assistant, I could ask it legal questions, but then it's going to give me results just that are because we're using LLM that have been scraped from the internet. So it could be inaccurate, it could be wrong, it could be hallucinated. That's why we're
Mm,
saying don't do legal research using the assistants right now. You still have to go to the platforms, the verified ones, to do them. But yeah, you could also ask it questions of UK law. You could ask questions of Nigerian law. It would give you an answer, but it might just not be correct or reliable.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, fine. Anyone else? If anyone's got any question on the actual demo, please jump in. So I'm kind of curious on some of the factors, the sort of success factors around it. So we're going to talk a little bit. And by the way, if you suddenly think of a question on the demo that you want to come back to, please do just jump in and ask. But so where are you seeing in terms of adoption? So a lot of the conversations I'm having at the moment are that it's not really just about the tech. There's so many other things in play in terms of adoption. So by the way, I hear, and this is quite sincere, I wouldn't say it, I hear such great things about your tech. And so that's not to say tech is not important, but the adoption piece and the human factor is so important right now. And I think one of the things it would be interesting to get your take on is around where you're seeing adoption highest, what the factors are around it. So, and I know one of the things that you've observed is about the way that people buy this. So in terms of how they vet the technology and who's involved. So I just wondered if you could share some of that
Yeah.
with us.
Absolutely. So I think AI is so transformative for the legal industry, and it's sort of like the second coming of the internet. It's just the challenges are different. And traditionally, you had these IT groups, or even KM groups just had kind of go out there and purchase the technology and then implement it,
Mm,
no problem, right? Working group doesn't even need to include attorneys or lawyers. But I think with AI, the lawyers need to be sort of involved from the start, not only from like a buy-in perspective, because people tend to be pretty skeptical and they need to see with their own eyes before they're actually going to use it. But also, it's only going to be useful if people can see it, um, you know, being fit for purpose in terms of their workflows and their work product. So, and only they kind of know whether it is. So, in the more successful implementations that I've seen this year, there are lawyers involved from the start and like vetting the solutions, testing the solutions, and sort of providing feedback on every step of the way as to which ones will work for their practice and which ones won't. So that's a major difference is that
mm,
it can't just be like the IT people um, sort of telling the firm what they need to get anymore. It needs to be from the lawyers. And it's often really funny because like the IT people were focused really heavily on security stuff. And then kind of not at all on the functionality. And then, it gets them across to the lawyers and they're like, the lawyers aren't using it. Why? It's super secure. And they're like, that's not what the lawyers care about. So that's one struggle. We've also seen that like because it's so new, there are a lot of firms and in-house teams that are trying to build up capacity now and build up kind of like their tech credentials. So it's like it's funny because you still need IT people involved. You need to people who have like a programming or familiarity with legal tech.
Mm.
And so we see that like some hiring internally to find people who might end up being legal engineers themselves, like myself, who are helping to automate different workflows using a variety of different tools and are like consulting on like that aspect of things.
Yeah, it feels like, yeah, I mean, perhaps a conversation for another time, but it feels like, the role of the IT team, it needs to evolve. And I think maybe part of that is mapping out what this looks like, being part of that whole process, right? And not trying to maybe land grab and say we have to be in charge of everything, but they should be one of the teams that's in charge of how decisions get made. And then there's almost like a structured process so that actually we know how these decisions get made. We're part of that decision and we're facilitating that. We have our really important part to play, but then this is how it happens. I feel like decision making needs to be more structured and automated, and everyone feels like they've had a say in the process, but they're not necessarily taking control of the process.
100%. I think if anybody's going to take control of the process, it needs to be somebody who's sort of like not tech and not lawyer, like an
Yeah,
innovation
project
officer,
manager.
something like, yeah. So really, I can't emphasize enough. It needs to be a cross-functional team. If you have an AI steering committee, there needs to be representatives from sort of like all the different teams, KM, IT, from the actual associates, from the partners. Also really different, right? Associates
Yeah,
are probably going to be the ones utilizing this technology. Partners need to sign off and champion and sponsor them internally, but really associates are going to be working with it. So they need to have a say as well. Paralegals, and then, yeah, an innovation team that's sort of at the helm of this and is sort of kind of relatively neutral, but acting as that internal glue that holds everybody together. And please, dear
yeah,
God, have a project manager because I think unlike other project implementations, this one really it's so nebulous and there isn't like a set formula with each firm. Like within each firm there's just different requirements, different processes, and so having somebody who's sort of masterminding that, keeping track of all the emails, all the different sorts of feedback from the different stakeholders, that has really been very I think a game changer in terms of how smoothly and how well those implementations go. And that was another thing in this year of we built up internal capacity to help with implementations. Like now the tools are out. Now it's really a matter of iterating on them and making them better, and pushing adoption. And I think every legal tech vendor has struggled. Like no one's like, our tool has been 100% accepted, no changes needed, 10 out of 10 on Yelp. Like there has been implementation and adoption issues kind of across the legal tech industry. So
yeah.
a lot of lessons learned this year.
I think that's where the partnership comes in as well, because I think that I wrote a piece the other day talking about it's partnership, not tech. I mean, it's tech as well, obviously, but it's that right now, because of the way that things are moving so fast and because of perhaps sometimes a lack of resource within firms, I think that having a partner that you can feed back to and that is responsive is really important. And that you say whether that's NetDocuments or whoever, I feel like for firms they need to find a partner who they can have that very responsive relationship with, because things are going to change.
It is a lot of work. And, for us, we have, if the firm's lacking resources and like NetDocs, we try our hardest to give you unlimited service hours.
Mm.
But we also might, be a little strapped as our customers are uptaking this technology. So we have a whole partnership ecosystem built out of
Yeah.
like third-party consultants, and that's always an option to sort of bring them in if you are resource strapped, sort of help you, smooth the way. And they're very good and like very well versed in what they do. So there's options out there. But yeah, it's like same, but different. You
There's a
know?
question on the zero data retention,
Mhm.
which I'm not sure I understand. So I take what you said about zero data retention. Can anyone have access to the documents as AI is reviewing them before they're deleted?
Well, they're
I'm not,
deleted immediately. So as soon as that processing is done and it gives us an answer, I think the answer is no. Like I think it would be really hard for someone to hack in and like view it at that exact moment as it's being processed. But it's not really my area of expertise, so it's not like it's a non-zero possibility, but I really don't think that practically speaking is a concern for us.
Yeah. And someone else has observed about sort of corroborating. So PMO is key for cross-functional or fail executive sponsorship. Executive sponsorship. That's an interesting piece, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a tough job too, right? Because I cannot agree enough. And yeah, I always thank my project manager and the various customers I'm working with like profusely for making my job much easier.
Oh, we've got someone from healthcare. So actually that's sort of explains some of the let's talk a bit
Well,
about the
it is zero access. Like I think there's nobody who's accessing it as you're sending that call to OpenAI, and that's immediately scrubbed. So just to be clear,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, so we talked about, so I was going to talk about zero data retention a little bit more, but I think actually we've covered it. So in terms of the learning, I know that as these things scale, there has to be such a huge focus on ethics and compliance at the very outset. And but also, and I think you've said that you think everybody should do ethics training, right?
Yeah. So, a few years ago, it was like, should we AI? And now it's like the answer has been answered. Like your client, the clients are expecting you to. So it's not whether AI anymore. It's like which and how.
Yeah.
Um, but I think at our customers, you still want to take a conservative, cautious approach. So before kind of letting anybody at the firm use that technology, everybody has to do AI ethics training, like
Mhm.
when to use it, when you need client consent, what the firm policy is, the sorts of things that you can't do with it. You have to validate the answers afterwards. Just some basic guardrails in place so that when people are using this, we're following like all our compliance requirements.
Yeah. Did you say that there's a firm that's got no names mentioning but has an AI passport?
That's what they call it, an AI
Is that
passport.
is that just to say that you've kind of passed all the training?
Correct. Yeah. I think it's twofold. It's like not only the ethics and compliance training and like your firm policy on AI, but also sort of some basics on how to use it, like how to use the assistant, how to use the app builder so that you're basically just like you're credentialed. You've gone through this, you know what it's about and how to use it properly.
I speak to a lot of firms that have exactly that. They have to have a basic level of training before using Gen AI tools, and then they're open to use them. But before that, they're often not able to. I think it's absolutely right. I think it's interesting because so many different ways of looking at it. But if you, don't think we're at the stage where, as you said, well, we're talking about should you or shouldn't you. But I do think we're at the stage of saying if you don't have legal AI tools, that there is much greater risk of people using the likes of ChatGPT and these. I think that you have to provide I think personally policy for starters. Like you have to have a very clear policy, then training, and then facilitate people to have tools that they can start playing around with, that are easy to use. But as you say, you need to create those guardrails. And and then I think the client thing is such an interesting question because so in the days of cloud, but you and I have both been through that as well. And I'm sure many people listening in have also. So people were asking clients to opt in, or if that's the right way to describe it, so they or consent to them using cloud. I think now, be interesting whether you agree. I think there's just this expectation that people will be using Gen AI tools, and the ones that I speak to are not going out and asking for consent in the same way as we did with cloud, and going through that kind of laborious process is actually a kind of opt out. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think the opt-out versus opt-in model is sort of kind of growing, but for, not in all instances, like some financial institutions famously have said, no, we are against this. I think
Yeah.
for now, I think it's inevitable, but for those ones, it's like you have to be aware of your various clients' sensitivity to this sort of thing. And if they've come out with like a statement, no AI, then obviously abide by it. But generally speaking, I think on the whole, like a lot of private equity and other big, big law customers are already doing AI stuff themselves. And so it
Yeah.
would be hypocritical for them to then turn to the lawyers and be like, don't do it. So that one, it's more opt out. There's also in some cases though where it's incredibly sensitive, competitive
Mm.
information. And in those instances, I think I see our customers being more careful and then actively seeking out consent. So it's like an opt out, but also case by case basis thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. I think, and there's always been those contradictions. I feel like there's, I mean, in a great period of time, obviously there's going to be contradictions, but there's the clients are putting pressure on law firms saying, how are you using Gen AI in order to speed up and become more efficient, as they should, and they've actually been doing that for a really long time. I was at a conference, a Chatham House conference, over a year ago, and one of the big legal teams was already saying, how are you saving us money? And then before law firms had any idea on how they were supposed to be using this technology in practice, we were still talking quite theoretically at the time because it really was a long time ago. But then equally saying, quite rightly, about how they're protecting their data and wanting some choice. And there still seems to be quite a lot of contradictions even now, in terms of the client position, I think.
I don't know. It's hitting us all. My fiance is in finance, and he turned to me because he was playing around with AI and like using it to drop press releases and using it to sort of like give him quick summaries of legal docs. And he's like, "I think you're out of a job." And I looked at him and I was like, "So are you." The AI is going to be able to financially model stuff and do other things. So we were just kidding, of course. We both very much value each other's professional lives, but
Yeah.
I do think that everybody kind of knows like the secret is out, that this is
Yeah.
performing very well. I'm also increasingly receiving less questions about, oh, but is it as accurate? Like, is it as good? You can just play with it right now, like 4.1 on ChatGPT 4.1 is extremely good.
Yeah.
Um, and the more I work with these tools, the more I'm impressed by them. I
Yeah.
still think that it's not like lawyers or consultants or finance professionals or anybody really is going to be out of a job. You still need a person to sort of go in there and validate everything and like um it still misses some stuff. It's like a very good first year associate. It used to be a mid first year associate. Now I think it's a very good first year associate, but a first year associate nonetheless, so
With just to wrap up, so in the last couple of minutes, so with the you've done the demo, we've talked through adoption, but in terms of the people using it within the workflow, so there's obviously increasing adoption, increasing comfort. We're seeing the results. It's saving time. You can see that in terms of people using it in their daily lives, in terms of it being embedded in the workflow, and how, to what extent would you say that's happening amongst the lawyers that you're seeing use the tech?
Um, with the assistant, I think people are going to use that quite a bit, like I
Mhm.
would, just to do a sanity check on like when I'm giving answers or, doing a first cut or something. But I don't think it's embedded like into everybody's everyday as of yet. Like some of these tools are still kind of clunky to use, for applications, you still have to spend and invest time in building them out. So they're not
Mhm.
like readily available for everything that you want. But I think as we march on, like it's going to get easier and easier. Like the integrations are going to be built. The user interface layers are going to become much better. And then, I think eventually we will reach a stage where it's so seamless that you will be doing it kind of every day and sort of like thoughtlessly. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you enter a search into Google right now, that's AI, right? It's giving you answers and stuff based on an AI algorithm. So
Yeah.
it's only a matter of time.
Do you think, to what extent would it be naive to suggest that people should be, in terms of the integrations, would it be naive to sort of do a call out to people to put pressure on their vendors to be more amenable to integrations? Do you think it's a case of clients putting pressure on their vendors, or is that just a bit naive?
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think it is going to have to come from they're like, why can't I do that yet? Like, why haven't you built that? And partnerships are forming like as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I do think there's going to be a bit of a race to build those integrations in the next year
Yeah.
or so.
I see some progress. I've seen some progress, you know. So, and I do think that clients, you know, will begin putting pressure on their vendors, particularly if we're starting to look towards agentic AI and really being able to. I mean, right now that's quite scary for people because I think that we're just becoming familiar with the underlying technology. So there've been, you know, some agentic and AI announcements. I question whether we're ready for it right now, to be perfectly honest with you. But I think it's a case of, you know, in order to be able to achieve that, there will need to be better integrations, and I'm hoping that we'll start to see more of those.
I think right now, this like past year, it was like you couldn't really talk about that yet because you're like, is your product legit?
Yeah,
Everybody was like, "Does even work?" Okay, now, yes, it does work. Now we can talk about, well, who does it make sense to partner with?
yeah.
You know, we have to see sort of like the emerging players in the market before we start building those integrations in order to make it meaningful, I think.
Yeah, true. I'd just like to say thank you. Probably start to wrap up, because I know people like to sort of say thank you right before the end of that hour. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think, as we wrap up, you wanted to chat about?
No, Caroline, you did an excellent job. That was everything in my brain for today.
It's you,
To
Jen,
have more
actually.
tea.
Aside from my mouth not working for the first part of this.
I can't.
Listen, so thanks for the demo. We'll make it available on recording. And it's always such a pleasure chatting to you. I really love the fact that we can be candid and you can be frank about where we're at in terms of the achievements, and it is huge. You know, when you think about how much has been achieved in the last little while, really, it's just moving so fast. So thank you. I really appreciate you making the time. There's lots of thanks coming in, and really, really great to have your engagement. So thanks to everybody listening in. And it is always a pleasure. And we will be doing another one of these in July. So we will be sharing a link with this one. So listen out for that and come join us.
Awesome. Feelings mutual. Thank you, Caroline.
Take care. Thanks, Jen.
Getting us through. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.